Well, hey everybody, welcome to this episode of the Ridge Community Church podcast. I'm Evan, the creative pastor here at the Ridge, and I'm joined today with two of my favorite people. We got Tyler, our Greenfield campus pastor, and Brodie, just sticking with a movie theme we like to call Captain Discipleship. You've heard of Captain America? Have you heard of Captain Discipleship? He's here.
He's fueled by Mountain Dew and he's ready to roll.
That is truth.
Yep.
So we've been doing these conversations, the movie after the movie, the after party for our At the Movie series that we are doing this summer. And whether you were here this last weekend or whenever you happen to catch up with this episode and didn't see our most recent At the Movies, that's okay. We're still going to have great relevant content. If you did get a chance to be a part of our experiences, we're going to add more on top, more conversation to just kind of dive even deeper into this subject. So, spoiler alert, if you didn't see it, we did a movie called A Man Called Otto. And Tyler, you were the person speaking for this one. Could you tell us, how did we end up with this being a part of At the Movies? What helped us decide that this was the movie we were going to do for this week?
Yeah, it's fascinating to be part of the At the Movies movie selection process. And, Mark starts kind of talking about it probably 6-7 months before we jump into it. And, Man Called Otto was actually being discussed, I believe, for last year. And, as you're kind of going through the selection process and, we want to get a lot of different variety of ones. That one just, said, hey, why don't we save that one for later? And then as we were resurfacing ideas for movies this year, one of the things that we're sensing and Mark and I talked a lot about was just the needs of our community. And really, I mean, you look at A Man Called Otto, and at the surface level, you would talk about some of the obvious situations of anger, depression, suicide, but really the layer underneath all of it is grief and unprocessed loss. That was really what was driving Otto to some of the decisions that we see him make throughout the film. And we know that in our culture today, there's a lot of unprocessed grief. A lot of us are dealing with loss, and it's not just the loss of someone, but grief can be a loss of a relationship, can be a loss of something, maybe an experience. We know COVID, even though it's several years ago, it just took out maybe some hopes, dreams, and desires for people that, hey, how do I grieve that? How do I mourn that loss and really experience the comfort? So that was the idea of what we wanted to talk about. And A Man Called Otto, I think, sets the table to open up the discussion.
Yeah. How often
I think it was. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, how often have we had movies where we have to give a tissue warning?
This is definitely the first one this year, but this was my third movie I've done over the years for At the Movies. I love being a part of the process; it's a lot of fun. By far, this was probably one of the more challenging ones to go through, watch, and then even work through. Like I jokingly texted a group of friends afterwards, knowing the films that we did for. I'm like, man, guys, I need to watch Tommy Boy after going through this one just to come out of it, but hopefully it was helpful for people as they're dealing with it.
Yeah. What are you going to say, Brodie?
I think it's just really helpful that we chose A Man Named Otto. There's a bunch of movies out there that bring some of these concepts in, but Tom Hanks, what he does in that is he helps us see kind of the two types of people that, like, he can be all in the same person. I mean, you see him like, hey, he's got a sense of humor. He enjoys the food from the next door neighbor. And then the very next minute, he's wallowing in the depths of grief, and now he's ready to end it all. And how often that's a realistic type of thing where we don't just like fall into the hole and never get out. It's like, well, I'm trying to live my life, and then I'm trying to deal with this, and it just really gives us a realistic point of view, I think.
Yeah, that's good. Well, Tyler, you leaned into the word grief. As I think about grieving, do you feel like in our culture, in our society, people that we live, work, and play with and in our everyday lives, that there's a lot of people that avoid grief? Like, is this something that we want to step into and do in a healthy way? And if we should, like, what are the healthy ways to grieve?
Yeah, great question, Evan. And I think culturally, I don't think we address grieving or mourning appropriately. I think ultimately, we find ourselves saying some things that might feel good at first or sound real at first, but don't really help us. Like, hey, time, heals all wounds. Well, time really just multiplies the things that we're feeling. And not grieving really is not appropriately treating a wound, so to speak. So, I mean, if, we were to cut ourselves or break an arm or whatnot, I mean, if we weren't to treat that, it's going to heal improperly, and then we won't recover to 100%. And grieving is the exact same piece of it. Like we shared in the film, Jesus said, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted." And that's the promise for those who mourn. And blessed just means, hey, we're more fortunate, we're happier, if you were to break down. But mourning is a process. And we spent some time throughout the film talking about that process where, well, we acknowledge what we lose. We talked about our loss and our sin, and loss and sin is connected. Maybe it's not direct. Your loss may not be a direct result of your sin, but just because of sin in this world and how it's just created loss throughout this world. So we want to acknowledge it. We want to get real and express our emotions to God as a part of that process. And I know for a lot of people that might be scary. Like, can I tell God that I'm angry? Yes, you can. And God wants us to. In fact, we see that all throughout Scripture, just getting real, honest, and expressing those emotions. And as we are real and honest, then we choose to trust God to bring healing to us. And so that's the process. And then as we discover that, we discover what God will then do to bring healing to us. And ultimately, it's often we can take that healing and we can do the exact thing for other people who are going through it as well. And that's what we discovered. And what Otto discovered in the movie was it was his service of others and being other-centered that lessened the pain, brought healing to his pain, and it made a difference to those around us. We find the same thing. When we're comforted by God, we can then take that healing and find a greater purpose by taking it and using it to make a difference in other people around us.
That's
I
good.
think Evan, the question you asked is a really good one. I mean, do we avoid grieving? And the answer is absolutely, especially on the male side of things, because I think that there's a misunderstanding of how long grief takes. Because if you have people are in it with you for the first 7 to 14 days, and they're moving on. Yeah. They got life to live. They've got all those things, and so somehow you should move on too, is kind of the feeling that you get. And yet, I mean, you're just being, when people lose somebody, I mean, 1 to 2 weeks, people are all around, they're doing all the things, and then they move on and life moves on and you feel like you're stuck. And so it's one of those things where you're like, okay, how do I move on? Do I compartmentalize this? Well, if I compartmentalize it, it's going to come squirting out all over the place. Is this weakness? Am I just weak? I should just buck up and I should be able to figure this out. I mean, that's a question we ask ourselves. And in the end, I don't think we live in a generation, and I don't even know if generations before us, where we know how to grieve. We just feel like we should be able to get over it. And it's not surprising if you go through, like, there's those 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. The only one I want to be a part of is acceptance. All those other things, I'm like, I don't want to be in denial. I don't want to have to deal with that. I don't want to be angry. And if I am angry, then people start to say, well, don't be angry. And they don't realize that there's something underneath that. So I think there's just a vast misunderstanding of how long that process takes and what it looks like. And if you're not getting help, you're just going to stuff it away until it comes out in a really weird way.
Well, and Brodie, I know you've seen this and found this. The timeline is different for every individual as you go through it, and then the cycles. Even though you say it's a cycle, the progression is different, and so you may find yourself in anger and then denial, while another person kind of backs that up, and all of that's completely normal. And so recognizing where you are and finding yourself in place to go through that process together is very critical.
Yeah, and then trying to do that in the midst of living with people who have focused on other things in their life and they don't understand. And I think, Tyler, you bring up a good point. There's different levels of loss too. I mean, if you lose a pet, okay, it's a certain amount depending on their connection. You lose a human, there's a whole nother level. You lose a job, you lose an opportunity. Yeah. It's all different types of things and have different processes. And you could be grieving a lot of different things differently all at the same time. So
Yeah. You guys would be surprised to find that we have a lot of correlations between this conversation and the conversation with Tommy Boy. I'm just telling you.
There's a lot of overlap. There really is. So.
Surprisingly. What would you guys say happens if someone does not give adequate opportunity for their grief to take place? They don't have to be like hypotheticals, but what are some things that happen if we don't give ourselves an opportunity to grieve some things?
Well, I think Otto is a great example of that. When you look at that, what are some of the two things that he's dealing with: depression and anger, and it was leaking out in all number of different ways. Even just looking at some of the most recent, suicide trends that we've been seeing, it's definitely prevalent in men right now, in all generations, including what's depicted in the movie as far as older men, but also younger men significantly as well. So, I mean, the emotions that are there and the feelings that are there will leak out. I think Brodie mentioned that earlier, just kind of squeezing out in just in unhealthy ways. And it's probably expressed primarily through those two emotions, depression and anger, and then can be taken out in, unfortunately, irreversible actions.
I think, Tyler, what I'd add to that is anxiety. It comes out as anxiety too, because what we don't fully process through, many times we'll be afraid of and afraid to confront. And so, I mean, when fear gets into the picture, the whole game changes. So I would agree with that.
Yeah. Well, Tyler, you started to step into it there for a second. This movie covers a really difficult topic. That I think just as human beings in 2024 and now into whatever the future looks like, we have to just come to terms with the reality that we live in a broken world. And a part of that broken world is people making a really harmful decision to take their own lives. And for anybody that's joining us as a part of this conversation, if that's a part of your story or people around you, people you love, we hate that has happened, and we love you and we care about you. And I'm sure for even just the three of us in this conversation, we've had just that reality affect us in really close ways. So why is it important, do you think it is for us to talk about depression and suicide and just be okay with saying the words out loud?
The reason why, there's a number of reasons why I think it's important and to talk about, but I think ultimately the biggest one that I see is it's impacting people. And if you look at the life of Jesus, he's all for people. I mean, the most popular Bible verse in the world: "For God so loved the world that he gave his son." That's how much he is for us. And so I can't help but think he didn't intend or want us to be in a spot where we thought, hey, this isn't the life that we want and take our life. In fact, Jesus said in John 10:10, he came to offer us life and life to the fullest and to the abundance. So there's some life that we were missing out on, and I think maybe being stolen from us because of depression and thoughts of hopelessness that take us down this road that we may think, hey, would the world be better off without me? So we want to bring healing into that, realizing like, no, God is there for you. I share that psalm in the message of, hey, my soul's downcast in despair, but on the other side of that is put your hope in God. Like we can have hope, and he is bigger than the despair that we feel. And I know for some people that might feel like a very easy, maybe trite answer to that, but I don't think God's trite. God really definitely is for you and wants to bring healing to this. So I think that's the main reason why we wanted to speak into it. Is this is a real issue that people are dealing with. I think the 11th overall cause of death, just overall of all ages right now, which is significant. You look at young people, it is much higher than that. And that's definitely not what God intended for us. And so, yeah, because God's for us, we want to speak into that.
Yeah. I think I'd feed off that. I think that hope piece is is a big one. Is that, I mean, when you talk about something and you start to say, okay, where's their hope in this? It starts to combat the despair that drives that, anyways. But I also think it's important to talk about it because it's widely misunderstood. When I was a kid and growing up, they're like, it's almost like a don't do it. Just suck it up. Your life is great. You should look around and look at all these things that you have. And it's trying to convince somebody that they shouldn't feel a way that they aren't trying to feel that way anyways. And so being able to talk about something, I'm entirely right. The 11th leading cause of death in the United States, over 50,000 people a year. And I think that what you said is right. It's hitting men, it's hitting young people, but the fastest growing age group where suicide's taking root is in 35 or older, which means that people are getting to a point in their life and they're saying, this isn't what I thought it was going to be. And so I feel I can't work, like I can't change this. I feel like I'm stuck. And so the only way to deal with it is to end it. And so when we talk about it and we talk about those things that Tyler mentioned earlier, is that Jesus came to give us life, and that it is possible that the best is yet to come, even though the moment is dark. I think we start to help people ask the right questions so that when they're in the dark place, that they actually can start to think a little bit differently and not just think about ending it, but what's to come and what could be. And that's a helpful tool when you're combating those difficult feelings.
Yeah. Yeah, Tyler, I loved in the message where, when we got to this topic, you didn't really hold back. And I think it is right to say, if you or someone is having thoughts about taking your own life, we just want to encourage you to seek help immediately. Tyler, you shared that number with us that's available 24/7, right?
988. Yep. Save it in your, Evan, and I know you know this, and Brodie, I know you know this, and I just want to call it out loud. Even ideation is more common than you think. And I know there's probably a lot of viewers, listeners who have maybe even had thoughts and wondered, hey, am I abnormal to have these thoughts? And you are not alone. And so don't stay alone. I mean, save that number, use it when you can. I just heard of a Ridge group the other night, and I won't share who or whatnot because, we promise confidentiality, but they said a number of them they didn't even know we were talking about this for at the movies and all of that, but it was brought up. And I know a person in there was like, hey, I think I know what the message is about this week. We got to be there. We got to be there for it. So, I mean, it's impacting everyone. I mean, and we know that. And so we definitely want to, save that phone and realize you're not alone, and there is help. There is help. I mean, I just would hate the fact if someone did a permanent action that we can't reverse, because you're not alone. You're not alone with us.
Yeah.
And I think there's an aspect of this, Evan, where there's some people that surround other people. When Tyler said when these things are kind of normal, you're not alone if you've had these feelings. I think there's some shame in parents in particular that, oh my gosh, my kid is having these feelings and they've voiced them, or they've tried something. This has got to be my fault, and I must have screwed it up. And I think that talking about this thing and saying things out loud like, hey, it's not about trying to figure out who's to blame. It's about taking steps forward. It's about including God in the mix. It's talking about hope. It's talking about how there's a future, that we need to set aside that shame and just say, hey, let's get help. Let's get help, because it doesn't mean that it's somebody's fault, especially a parent's fault. If a teenager is in a really tough spot, there's just some things that we need to do to take steps to help.
Yeah. Reaching out for help is not a sign of weakness. It's a very bold and courage and strong step, and one that I know the three of us will cheer and applaud every single time that a person takes that.
Yeah, and Brodie, as you talk about, different generations, I feel like my upbringing was kind of similar to yours. It was kind of like the dare dog as well, like just don't do it. That was kind of all the messaging I really heard. And I was reading a parenting book recently because we could talk about that for hours. I could use all the help I can get. And I talked about how our critical generation thinks about this subject, and just said that it used to be when teens were upset about something and it's skewing younger and younger, you used to hear, I'm going to run away. Like, I'm going to pack my bags and I'm
Mhm.
going to run away. And this therapist was saying, I haven't heard of a kid threatening to run away for years. All I've heard recently is, I've been thinking about taking my own life.
Mhm.
And so when we say that this is a difficult reality and we have to come to terms with that, it's real. And even for for our ones, the people in our lives that we care about and we love deeply. Tyler, you mentioned, this is a decision that you can't reverse.
Mhm.
So I just think about the fact if we have someone in our lives that we think is anywhere near, remotely near thoughts of suicide, take the risk and have a difficult conversation, ask a difficult question, because if someone gets to that point, there is no reversing that
Mhm.
decision. Um, well, that's a really light subject to really cover in just a few minutes on a podcast conversation.
Mhm.
Mhm.
How have you guys felt about at the movies so far in the few weeks? And do you feel like there's any, man, we really should have done this movie? Some honorable mentions that maybe should be considered for the mix next time around.
Ooh, I'll take on the first question. Tyler, you can take on the second one.
Mhm.
Um, I think as far as at the movies, it's been very interesting how we planned the order of things a long time ago, and
Mhm.
yet now we get into these weeks and how that first week with the Marvel movie that it really aligned with some things that were happening in culture when talking
Mhm.
about division and unity and all those things. And then, I mean, Tommy Boy last week, all sorts of things, but just being able to see in somebody like that that we can change. And there's a lot of people who feel like, hey, once they're in their bucket, we can't change. And so I think it's been going great because I think it's hitting topics and themes that are right out there in front of us in culture today.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, one of the coolest parts is seeing the build of the overall series and how, they can play off one another, and you see the different lineups, the different themes, and each of the different teachers and what they're thinking through to how it's going to go. We got 2 more weeks left that I'm really excited about, and I do think that this is probably one of the strongest lineups that I think we've had throughout the movie series, and we've had great years, and so I'm really proud of what we've done for this year. As far as honorable mentions, I don't know if I'm going to say any because a lot of times we will. I'll say Mark, Jody, and I think a few others. We have some idea buckets already for next year, and so there's some ones that I'm like, oh, this could be fun. This could be fun. And so we'll save those, but we love the mix of it. I think finding, whether it's an action movie, drama, sleeper hit, comedies. I mean, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun. So
Oh yeah.
Well, we look forward to next at the movies covering the ridge and biblical principles between Ace Ventura and Fire,
my
possibly.
childhood, Jim Carrey. Yeah, right.
Oh my goodness.
I
Alrighty
I
then.
think Mark is up to the task of pulling biblical principles from Austin Powers. I think it can be done. I
Oh
think
man.
Uh,
If
I'll
anybody can.
I'll give him credit. He sent me the script for Tommy Boy, and I read through it, and he's like, "Hey, I think I did this. I think I pulled it off." And I read it, and I was like, "Dude, well done, well done. You figured it out." And so I think he unlocked a new master level of at the movies that maybe one day I can hope to achieve. We'll see.
well, thanks guys for diving into this topic a little bit more, and thank you for joining our conversation. And we hope to see you for the rest of at the movies or anytime on the weekend
Mhm.
services at any of our campuses. We would love to see you, and we hope you have a great week.